Tonight, guess what's coming to dinner?
Ladies and gentlemen, enter the duck.
I just find it incredible at present, given that we've just had issues such as the bird flu outbreak, that farmers are still not understanding that they shouldn't do this sort of thing.
When premium prices don't guarantee a premium product.
I'm not a person that's usually put off by watching things like that, and certainly nothing really puts me off my food, but I'm actually not looking forward to tasting that.
Undercover, investigating the RSPCA's ethical food label.
The RSPCA has made the point that no assurance scheme can guarantee to maintain standards on days when the assessors are not present. Well, I don't think that's good enough.
Good evening. Last week, a new report revealed a boom in the sales of ethical meat reared to the highest possible standards. More than half the population now regularly pays extra for premium products that guarantee that animals live under the best welfare and hygiene conditions. But a year-long undercover investigation of some of the country's leading ethical food producers has revealed some unacceptable conditions. Jonathan Maitland reports.
Once upon a time, you'd have had more chance of finding a snowman in the Sahara than a British fridge full of so-called ethical food. But not anymore. This year alone, British shoppers will spend £2 billion on food which, the labels reassuringly claim, has been produced using the very highest standards of animal welfare. But that reassurance is expensive. We pay up to 3 times more for food that's ethically produced, which is why this dinner party costs so much, based as it is on food carrying those all-important ethical labels. The aim is simple, to see if we can trust those labels. And my guests are people who care about the way their food's produced, like Carl and Caroline.
Well, we look for organic, RSPCA, which...
Freedom food.
Yeah, which indicates to us that the animals are properly reared and cared for and fed, and also that they're slaughtered correctly.
David and Christina.
Do look at labels, but if I'm brutally honest, sometimes the budget becomes a bigger consideration.
Fiona.
We like to know that the butcher that we go to would actually demonstrate that it is ethically good meat.
And Kate.
Just generally look at the produce and just make sure it's good quality, but also money does come into it as well.
This is a meal with a difference, all right, because everything we're going to serve you up is top-notch, basically, in terms of the way it's produced, or at least it should be, if you believe the claims and assurances made on its behalf. Yeah. But what we're going to do tonight is test some of those claims to see if they really do stand up. I mean, it should be the ultimate ethical food experience, but we're going to show you some films and then see what you think.
Our first course comes from, apparently, the most ethical of producers, a company called Traditional Norfolk Poultry. A premium supplier to supermarkets, this firm makes some impressive claims. We combine ethical, time-honoured growing and farming practices to produce birds of real quality. Traditional Norfolk Poultry operate the very highest standards of welfare, selecting only the most conscientious farmers. This is Hall Farm in Norfolk, which rears turkeys for Traditional Norfolk Poultry. In contrast to the claims on the company website, the birds are living in filth. Their feathers are dirty from urine and faeces, and dead animals are left to rot. Meanwhile, severely injured birds are left in agony for days. We asked Bill Swan, the former head of the veterinary department at the RSPCA, to examine the footage, which was shot by Hillside Animal Sanctuary, an animal welfare organisation.
What is wrong with that turkey?
This turkey's been head-pecked. The other turkeys have turned on it and started to head-peck it, and they will eventually do this until they kill it. I have concerns because birds which were either ill or being attacked, they're not being dealt with when there are apparent problems with them. They should be taken out of that environment so that their welfare is protected.
He was also alarmed by rotting birds left uncovered near the turkey shed.
I just find it incredible at present that farmers are still not understanding that they shouldn't do this sort of thing. So this is all about stopping infection. This is all about stopping the spread of infection from farm to farm. It's not just affecting this farm, this is affecting the national security of our bird flocks.
Are the claims made on behalf of this meat accurate?
Certainly in respect of animal welfare, what I've seen on this video does not represent the high standards of animal welfare.
What do we think of what we just saw, Carl? What did you think?
Well, I was actually quite disgusted. I'm not a person that's usually put off by watching things like that, and certainly nothing really puts me off my food, but I'm actually not looking forward to tasting that, knowing that those are the conditions that those birds were kept in.
Yeah, what was it that kind of upset you the most?
Well, the conditions and the state of the birds, really. Just the open wounds, the spread of diseases that could be about. I'm really not looking forward to eating that at all.
So the key question is, who's hungry?
For the noodles.
Is that a refusal?
Yeah, I don't think I want to eat it.
Really?
Really? Now you put me off a bit. Let me just taste it and see what...
I just keep seeing that turkey with
Absolutely.
the big head. That image is stuck in
that
my,
really
in
is
my
quite...
mind.
Let's be realistic, OK? If we showed you footage of even the most ethical farm, it would be a bit grim. There would be the odd bird that was attacked by its mates, and it would be there before it got removed. So are we kind of aiming impossibly high?
I mean, if you go to public loos, you know the public loos have been looked at. You know what I mean?
They're
Look at the
checked
farm.
every hour,
They're checked
aren't
every
they?
hour.
Exactly.
You can check a few chickens and a few
excuse for
turkeys.
leaving a lady bird for 2 days.
Hall Farms said their standards had slipped in the last few months and they were ceasing turkey production forthwith as they'd failed to maintain traditional Norfolk poultry's high standards. Traditional Norfolk poultry said they were shocked and disturbed by the allegations.
Right, the next course is on its way, but I just want you to see this footage first, OK?
This time it's more than just neglect and dreadful conditions, but evidence of cruelty. On the receiving end are animals which, it's claimed, are ethically reared. Manor Farm Ducklings, one of Europe's largest duck companies, supplies big supermarkets and Chinese restaurants. Its claim for the welfare of its intensively reared ducks is that it's the next best thing to free range. This is Cherry Dean Farm, which rears birds for Manor Farm Ducklings. Here, ducks were being dangled by the neck, kicked and thrown, and stuffed into crates. These incidents were frequent. The conditions were unpleasant, and injured birds were neglected.
I really don't like the way that these ducks were being handled. They've been grabbed by the neck. Well, fine, you can catch a duck by the neck. You should not lift a heavy duck of those sorts of weights by the neck. And it's so easy to become desensitised to the fact that these are living, sentient animals which can feel pain and which can experience distress.
He's punching the duck.
The punching is just a gratuitous act, and there's no excuse for that. That shouldn't happen.
Would you take action against this place?
My feeling is that that represents an act of cruelty. I can't make the decision that a court would make as to whether this was actually an offence, but I think the evidence there is such that that could have been taken as a prosecution.
And there was a problem with hygiene. Near the growing shed, carcasses were left to rot. Flies from the maggots could spread disease far and wide.
The conditions the ducks were under, like lame ducks, ducks dead in a big skip right near, you know, the rest of their life, with maggots, and disgusting.
Well, let's see free range and do a compare and contrast, you know, because that, to me, they're in a shed, they're getting beaten up. For what reason? Why were they getting beaten up?
I mean, this poor duck doesn't know how it's supposed to behave, and for a man to grab it by the neck and punch it around the head, I mean, what was he thinking? Where's his going with that?
Manor Farm Ducklings said it was now introducing RSPCA welfare standards across its contracted farms. The RSPCA and the police did investigate the duck punching but did not proceed. Manor Farm Ducklings fully supported the investigation and the employee was disciplined. The RSPCA, of course, is possibly the most recognised and trusted name of all when it comes to animal welfare, and it's them we feature next. They run Freedom Food, the largest industry scheme of all. It lays down ethical standards for the raising of millions of animals. RSPCA logoed Freedom Food is available at major supermarkets and gives an impressive guarantee. All animals must be reared according to strict animal welfare standards.
A standard oven is big enough to roast 1 chicken. Or rear 5 live ones.
At the heart of the scheme are the RSPCA's 5 freedoms. Freedom from hunger and thirst, freedom from discomfort, freedom from pain, injury or disease, freedom to express normal behaviour, and freedom from fear and distress. But Celia Hammond, a former member of the RSPCA's governing council, believes the public don't appreciate the full picture.
These 5 freedoms are aspirational, but the problem is that the public don't know that. The public see a piece of meat with a Freedom Food logo on it, and they think, we trust the RSPCA, this must be fine. You know, obviously this animal's had a wonderful life, it's been reared in the fresh air, you know, it's had a lovely humane death with no suffering or fear. I'll buy that, that's fine.
Celia Hammond thinks there aren't enough RSPCA assessors to do the job properly. Just 10 monitor 53 million animals and just under 2,500 farms.
The RSPCA has made the point that no assurance scheme can guarantee to maintain standards on days when the assessors are not present. Well, I don't think that's good enough.
What does this logo mean to you then if you see it on a piece of duck or pork or whatever in a supermarket?
The welfare of the animal before you eat it, is taken into consideration. It's been well looked after, it's been well fed and cared for, I hope.
Clean, healthy, stress-free.
Now that tells us that an organisation as renowned as the RSPCA are actively involved, and there's some policing involved, that it's not up to the farms to make these claims. This is a claim that is supported, backed and endorsed by an organisation.
OK, those are the expectations. This is the reality.
This is a farm that produces ducks under the RSPCA monitored Freedom Food scheme. Ducks with severe injuries or disease are left in distress to suffer for days, and there's also a high level of lameness. Dead ducks left for days. Not what you'd expect on a farm displaying the RSPCA logo. And the water is filthy, despite the requirement for a hygienic water source.
How worried were you by that duck's twisted neck?
I would like to see birds which develop conditions like this removed as soon as is practically possible. And if those birds are being inspected once or twice a day, I would expect them to be removed on that sort of basis, yes. What I saw there, first of all, is a number of ducks that were lame. I wouldn't expect this under a high welfare system. There were quite a number of dead ducks in the shed as well, which some of them were not immediately dead. They had been dead for a little while. And also I had an issue with the water, the cleanliness of the water. So that's something I would want to go back and have investigated.
Does that live up to the standards promoted by RSPCA Freedom Food?
I think the Freedom Food scheme would not expect to see lame ducks. So in that respect, this, I don't feel, meets the standard.
Those animals who are clearly suffering, I mean, they were displaying signs of severe stress, a lot of them.
Can't expect the Ritz, can you?
The Royal Society, you'd expect it to be the Ritz. The Royal, I mean, that's got a key
connotation.
Absolute massive label.
That's what they're charging the extra money for.
Yeah.
And how much more do you to pay for RSPCA Freedom Food monitored produce, roughly?
Well, sometimes you can pay 2-3 times the amount of normal stuff, yeah.
So how much is an RSPCA monitored Freedom Food chicken on a good day?
Ooh, well, depending on the size, you're looking at probably...
7 or 8 quid it can be, can't it?
Yeah.
Although there are minimum standards, no RSPCA monitored farm guarantees to achieve the 5 freedoms. They are, the Society says, just aspirations.
I mean, to be fair, one thing our vet did say is that most farms which run this scheme don't run farms like that. So his point is they're trying, at least, and it's good that they're trying.
So any farm could turn around and say, well, actually, we're aspiring to give them the 5 freedoms, but we're not giving them any. but they still get the badge.
Yes, it's kind of aspiring. Kind of gives you a get-out clause, doesn't it?
Of course,
that word.
A huge clause to get out.
Yeah. Enter the duck. Hands up. Who wants to try some? Dave, 1 out of 7. 2.
No matter what conditions that duck was raised in, if we don't eat it, then that's died for nothing. It's been raised, it's been slaughtered, and it's going to end up in the bin, having achieved nothing in the food cycle. So although I might not agree with the way it's been raised, to me, to throw it in the bin without attempting to eat it is worse than actually eating it.
Yeah, OK, well, let's scoff it. Kate, can you pass it around?
The duck farm in question has now been sold. The old owners said it operated to the highest standards, but the new ones said it wasn't up to the mark or fit for the purpose, and they're shutting it down.
One more mouthful and then we're on to the next course. Again, this is RSPCA Freedom Food.
So far, we've just featured poultry, but now it's the turn of pigs, the most sensitive and intelligent of all farm animals. These are the conditions we found on one RSPCA monitored farm. There was no straw for the pigs to sleep in, a major requirement under RSPCA standards. And there were lame pigs that appeared to be in pain. RSPCA standards state they should be segregated to prevent further injury.
The Freedom Food Scheme is a really good, solid scheme. Principles that are enshrined in there that are relevant to this, firstly, is that pigs should have a dry lying area and should have a good, well-bedded dry area.
Is it that serious, though, if 2 of the 5 rules of freedom that RSPCA Freedom Food promotes aren't kept to?
The lameness issue is an important one because that's quite a serious welfare issue, because lameness involves usually quite a lot of pain. The reason that the animal doesn't put weight on the leg is because it hurts. And so in that sort of environment, which pigs are quite close together, they will get knocked around, so this is going to increase the discomfort. It is just good practice, and it is a requirement of the Freedom Food Scheme that those pigs are taken out and put into separate accommodation. Yeah. And if we want our food produced to high welfare standards, then issues like this are critically important if that's something the consumer demands. But it's the sort of thing that can bring a scheme into disrepute if you have some farmers who are not actually sticking to it and not actually doing what they should.
Isn't it better to buy food, meat, whatever, that aspires to be ethically produced and fails a bit, like perhaps this stuff does, rather than buying stuff which we know is just rubbish and horrible and unhealthy? Oh, are we being a bit too picky, you know?
Well, I think if they're promoting that they're sticking to these 5 points, surely they should tell us, you know, which ones they're meeting, which ones they're not, because that would be quite accurate then.
The farm said it had not contravened Freedom Food standards and has an exemplary record in animal welfare and couldn't comment further without access to the footage. The Freedom Food Scheme is run as a subsidiary of the RSPCA and receives millions from the charity's donations, but some members of its governing council are concerned by the lack of information they get from the RSPCA.
We were not allowed to know where the farms were. We used to get reports of farmers who had transgressed and who had their licences taken away temporarily or apparently, but then we stopped even getting that. You know, so much of what the RSPCA does is good. I just feel that in this case, they've got it wrong. I don't think this is something that the RSPCA should get involved in.
You've seen our footage, yeah. Were the conditions on those farms good enough, do you think?
There were some examples of very poor animal welfare on those farms and of animals that were clearly suffering, and that's not good enough.
How could you let this happen then? I mean, people buy that produce coming from those farms because your logo is on it.
We have the most monitoring of any of the labelling schemes that there are in this country, but we're not sitting on a farm 24 hours a day monitoring, so we don't see what's going on all the time. So inevitably, sometime things will go wrong.
Yeah, but no one expects 24/7, 365 days a year monitoring. But how can you possibly do your jobs properly when you've got 10 inspectors, OK, to 53 million farm animals? How can you possibly do your job properly?
Well, we made 4,500 visits last year alone, so we're visiting all of the accredited schemes at least once a year or once every 15 months. It would be good if we could do even more. We're a charity, we have limited resources like any other organisation, but we do more than any other scheme.
But why should consumers pay up to 2 or 3 times as much for your Freedom Food logo produce when actually the ones we spoke to think they're not getting what they pay for, which is the 5 freedoms?
What they are getting is RSPCA monitored and animals reared to RSPCA standards. They're getting better welfare for those animals than they would do if they buy cheaper products that's not reared to those standards. I'm not ashamed of that, I'm very proud of it. But I am ashamed when I see examples of bad welfare. I'm not happy about it. We're a welfare organisation, we're not a commercial organisation.
What you're saying is that the Freedom Food logo and the 5 freedoms are aspirations?
The 5 freedoms have always been aspirations, yes. And the Freedom Food scheme, you know what our aspiration is? Our aspiration is that that becomes legal minimum standards, and then every farm animal benefits from that standard.
It's only an aspiration. It's a built-in excuse, a ready-minted excuse for failure.
Why would we be looking for an excuse, and why would we want to fail? The RSPCA is an animal welfare organisation. The reason we involved ourselves with this scheme in the first place, which was a high-risk thing to do and costs us over £1 million a year to do, the reason we did that is we want to improve farm animal welfare.
What former trustees of the RSPCA have said to us is that they didn't even know which farms were succeeding and which farms were failing. Now, if you don't tell your own members what's going on, how can the public have confidence in you?
The farms would be concerned about commercial secrecy. They would also be concerned if trustees left papers lying around, that someone who's going to go and do some covert filming might pick up those papers and go and break into the farm. But we're not secretive about the number of farms or the number of units where there are breaches of the regulations.
What is your message to all the kind of ethical and high standards of animal welfare food producers?
Try and take better care of the animals that you're looking after.
There should be a grading system where it's bronze, silver or gold, depending on what standard they're at.
It's got to be honest labelling. I want to know what I'm eating, and I'm hoping the person that's producing that food is honest with me, and I can then make the choice.
Carolyn, what have you learned?
They seriously need to up the ante, as far as I'm concerned.
I guess the moral of the story is, to the producers who are trying to come up with this ethical food, must try harder.
Yes.
Jonathan Maitland reporting. And we'd like to reiterate that the evidence presented in tonight's film was based on undercover filming at a limited number of farms. There is no evidence to suggest that what we observed is typical of standards at other ethical producers. And for more information, you can visit our website at itv.com/tonight.